Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you today. We got first timer Josh Tyler here. Very excited. And now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Do the things like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Fridays for The Collective. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section and we can hit those throughout the show. Other than that, let's get into a quick little intro and then we can get into our conversation. Josh, 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Oh, man. Josh Tyler. I hail from the great state, the Commonwealth of Virginia. Father of three, founder and co-owner of SavageGentleman.com, and former professional fighter. Before that, I was a teacher. And now, I don't know, I just do random and assorted things in life, and then sometimes I project them onto the internet, and then sometimes we share those with other people in person where we have events where guys come out and then also do some of the cool stuff that I like to participate in.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw initially what caught my eye. You were out with Rudy Reyes and you guys were climbing up the that steep traverse there, and it was awesome. Shaun, how's the mountains treating you out there?
Things are good. I do love Rudy, so that must have been fun.
It was fantastic. I actually just got off the phone with Rudy. Part of the reason why I was running a little late is because he had called me because he's actually partnering up with us to continue to do more events. And so we were strategizing, and I looked at my phone and I was like, so I had to run. Like, I just got off of work and I had to run in the house, throw on the vest, and then here we are, which is why the hair is like it looks, like we already discussed earlier.
I love it. I love it. Now, and Rudy's an energy all of himself. So like, awesome. I know what it's like when we're talking with him. He's like takes over the room. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Now we are going to be getting into, how we want to live. So like individually, how do we figure that out? Where do we start? So I want to get just some initial thoughts on that concept. How I want to live. What's the first thought? The first thing that comes to your mind, Josh?
For me, I think we have to have some experience to kind of base that off of, right? There's at least some observation. There needs to be something to look to external to aspire towards. And I think if we don't have anything like that, then we're often just left with whatever is put in front of us, which could be great. Oftentimes it maybe isn't ideal. So I think that's where we start is kind of this outward projection as to what is around me and what is actually possible.
I like that. That's a good start, Shaun. You got thoughts on this?
How to live my life? How I've been living it, I suppose. And how will I live it next year? Hopefully better, because that's the way I like to run my program, the relentless pursuit of excellence in all things, to include my life. So if something's slipping through the cracks, I'll address it. If there's something that I want to crack out of the park, it'll get cracked. So I've lived my life the way I've lived my life for a long time, and I don't see it changing a whole lot other than to,
Bam. I like it. Picking up that pace. Now, the reason I kicked this off and I came up with this topic in general is the fact that I see this a lot out on the internet of people who are, espousing certain aspects of life or telling others how they should live their life, et cetera, et cetera. So I got a video here just on that, and then we'll get our discussion going. Here we go.
People will do their best to force you to be the person that they want you to be, not the person that you're supposed to be. Your job in this world is to not listen to people telling you how to live and work out how you want to live.
Bam. Nice and quick. But let's get your thoughts on that, Josh. Anything spark?
I mean, it's pretty solid advice. And I think what often happens is we are very easily influenced by the world, right? So there's kind of a paradox there where it's like I need something external to compare my reality against, or at least to have a sense of my reality. But I also have to be keenly aware that that external thing can influence me potentially in ways that I don't want to be influenced. And so it's managing both of those aspects at the same time and living our life in a way that we're supposed to, I think, is actually more about a removal process than it is addition. Whereas we're created to be a certain way, we are who we are, and we're actually never not, deep down inside. And living life in the way that we're supposed to is actually removing the external influences that are essentially our not self. Even though we may come to identify as this thing, this job or this title that I've been given or this story that's being told about me as myself. And it's actually not necessarily true. And being able to recognize that is important.
I like that, Shaun. What are your first thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm kind of in line with that as well. And I'll say that, watching that video, I think every single human being does a quick comparison or a quick contrast or a quick contextualization. I know I did, and I think most people do. When they watch that video, they're listening to the words, and depending on how much you pay attention to detail, you'll also count how many carabiners he had on him. 5. You'll also wonder why he had a massive set of house keys dangling off of one of those carabiners. A lot. You'll also wonder why his little portable microphone was hanging off of a stick, because it's a thing out there on the internet right now. You'll wonder a lot of things, depending on how closely you look and how deeply you think about the moment. Or you'll just listen to his words and shrug your shoulders and not pay attention. All of this is on us. All of this is for us to decide how much we want to engage in live/a video. And so I like what he had to say. I am curious about all of the need for carabiners, but maybe that's for a different podcast.
Well, he had a lot of trees in the background too, right? So maybe he's just hooking up to things and sliding around and making videos. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it made me think when you guys were talking is that, especially Josh, what you said was, it almost seems like a filtering process in figuring out how we want to live, right? We can compare, we can contrast, and then filter. So, this resonates with me, this resonates with me, that does not resonate with me. And you just slowly filter what you want to do. And there's a theory in physics about the great filter of civilizations reaching a certain point or destroying themselves ahead of time. And I wonder if that could be applied to our own lives, and the fact that if we filter ourselves well enough to the point that we become who we're supposed to be and we can really excel beyond our boundaries, or do we hit a point where we start to destroy ourselves just in general because we don't know where else to go? What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think that can definitely happen. And this idea of filtering, I think, is really great. The way we perceive the world becomes our reality, right? And so that is the filtration process. All matter, all information exists simultaneously everywhere, all at once. If you go down that, kind of quantum physics rabbit hole, which means that in order for us as human mortals to make heads or tails of it, we have to filter that information. We cannot withhold all of that at once. So our brains are configured in a way to naturally filter certain things out. We only perceive 1% or less than a fraction of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, right? In the sounds we hear and the colors, right? But the reality is all of that stuff exists. We just don't perceive it. So if I understand that, then I can start to fine tune that perception, and it starts to very much affect the reality that's around me, which in turn also affects my place in said reality and my pathway, and inevitably who I actually am.
Interesting, Shaun. You got thoughts on that?
I do. So just to play a little bit with what Josh said, I think that if we're talking about the filtration process, which would infer that a person is progressing along a timeline and improving, probably, maybe. The idea being that if we are looking at things from a quantum mechanics basis or quantum theory basis, then we already exist in the spot that we're supposed to exist, because we're only in one spot in the time-space continuum. And so that one spot is universal or is eternal or is however you want to frame it. And so how much are we moving along the timeline to improve? Well, that's contextual, isn't it? And that really depends on where you base your baseline launching point from. Is it from when you were 6 years old? Is it from when you were 1 year old? Is it from when you were 27 years old? Is it from yesterday? Is it from the eternal timeline? There's lots of ways to chew on this one for sure. I'll bring it back down into simple language, and I'll say this, that I think it's our responsibility to continuously move down the timeline in an improvement basis, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us, so that they can see how it's done. Back to the context. You won't see me wearing 5 carabiners. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means that you'll look at me and look at someone who's wearing 5 carabiners and think, I choose the guy with all the carabiners, or I choose the old dude. Whichever way it is, we all get to move down the timeline making choice based on context and comparison, which is where we started, I believe. And so as long as you're aware that you're in the game of life, which requires you to pay attention to these kind of things, then generally speaking, things work out.
Yeah, and I want to throw a wrench into this a little bit too, because initially I wrote down, what about the cost of others, right? Because technically we can do anything we want. We can, if I want to be the best, I want to make the most money in the world, well, I can do that on the backs of a lot of people, or I can do it in other ways, right? And there's ways to, live your life moving forward and trying to get better in certain ways. But what if that is at the cost of those around you? Shaun, I'm going to come right back to you. What do you think?
I'll say this, that it depends on how you approach your worldview. So I'm going to go a little bit esoteric here, or a little bit out there. If you consider that right now, what we're all externally sharing this moment while we're talking and looking at each other on the computers, the moment that I reach over to my mouse and click close screen, you're not in my universe anymore. Technically, you don't exist until I make you exist again by reconnecting with you. That's our freaking journey, man. Who we connect with makes them exist in that moment in our universe. And by the way, it is my universe. It's not Chance's universe. It's not Josh's universe. You've got your own universes that you're running, that you choose to let people into or out of within your time-space continuum. And so life, as I see it, is a matter of choice, understanding that you're the one who's choosing your universe, the outcomes that you face more often than not. And we could throw in the randomness of bad luck and all of that good stuff, and being tragically injured or getting a disease or various things that kind of mess with the timeline, as it were. All of the things, all of the stuff in our lives, that's our life to control. And the external world all around us, that's the world that we shape, we create by choice. And so if Josh is tired of this nonsense, he'll reach over, close down this tab, and again, Shaun and Chance don't exist for Josh anymore until he chooses whatever he wants to choose in the future if he wants to reconnect. That is the way of the world for me. Now, that's a very simple overview, but I do believe that it's really important that everyone understand that all of the hardships and adversity, all of the struggles in life, all of the wins, the celebrations, and the joy in life, both sides of the coin, it's all your universe to control.
I'm really digging this choice angle. Josh, you got points on that?
Yeah, I love everything about that. I mean, I think Shaun's touching a little bit on, I guess, the concept of non-local reality, right? Where, and then just kind of the observer changes the outcome as well, which, are very interesting and pretty heady concepts that are way above my pay grade. But this idea that we are the creators of our reality to an extent through our perception or through our choice, right? Like the only thing you can actually control 100%. And even that is sometimes gets a little bit dicey because I don't know how many of you guys have had just a song pop in your head and you can't get it out, right? And so, like, really, the only thing we have choice over, or control over, rather, is our mind, and that can be sometimes tricky and difficult. But it's incredibly powerful, and I think recognizing that like my perception, the way that I view the world and perceive it, is entirely up to me, and that really is what creates it, whether I click the button or not, and I how I interact with these other people. See, I think a lot of times we think the world is made up how other people interact with me, but I think that's inverted, right? We can put the onus on someone else, and we could say, "Oh man, everybody's a jerk. People are just such a-holes," and that kind of comes back to the old adage: is like, well, if every person that you meet is an a-hole, like maybe you're the common denominator here, right? And so being able to accept this concept of being masters of our own destiny in that way, I think is really useful. There's a saying that all models are wrong, but some are useful, and so it's like any ideology we can come up with will break down at some point, right? Because you can't have, like we said before, the entirety of everything, reality, in one place. Like, our brains just can't fathom that. And so any model that we try to construct, at a certain point, it will have a fail point, right? A map that I have, unless it is even a map of my backyard, unless it is my actual backyard, it will be missing information. And so when we can accept that, then now all of a sudden we can just shift from one model to the next as necessary. And it's not about having to be right on a certain concept, because you recognize, well, I actually can't be all the time everywhere. All I can do is use the information that I have to the best of my ability and continue to move forward on that timeline and hopefully improve the model as I go. And that model is just the concept that I have in my head in the way that I perceive the world around me.
I got this really great mental image when you're talking about the development of a model. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the 3D imagers, right? You can just scan something and it creates the 3D model into the program on the computer. But I like the way you brought that up, because it does. That's how you create your own life. That's how you develop your own ideas. That's how you're basically rendering a model of the world and then updating it as per necessary. And it just comes down to kind of how much processing power you have in the moment, how much capability you have within the gun that is actually modeling your thing. I'm digging this a lot. Shaun, you got any additional points on any of this?
Yeah, it's a great observation, Chance, and I think that you've got something there. However, the difference, in my opinion, is this: a scanner is present, and so when it's scanning and capturing ones and zeros or data, and then uploading that maybe into your hardware software called your brain, as it's doing that, it's only a present tool. But your brain exists currently as a present state, a past state, and a future state to give context to the present model. And so no scanner, no world tool that you can pick up off the desktop can be used like your brain, or can be used like your imagination, or can be used by your past reflections. And so you have like a triple scanner in your pocket, as it were, the past, present, and future, to give context to that rendering. And so I think where maybe not everyone uses the tool to the best of its abilities is if you get trapped in a particular state, let's call it in the past. Now you're ruminating about the past. You can't get out of that cycle. You're struggling in your past. You've still got two states that you can play with, the present and the future, but you don't, because you're working on that thing that you did in high school, that thing that you said to the girl, that time that you kicked that dog, that time that you threw a rock through the window. All of these things ruminating on the past doesn't allow you to operate in a tri-state simultaneously. It locks you into the past scanner, as it were. So I like your scanner idea. I just think that we have more than a present scanner.
We got the triple scanner for when you kick the dog. Josh, you got any additional thoughts on this?
I really love that idea, and your concept of rumination, I think, is super accurate. You know, and if you think about what that really means, like think about a ruminant animal. Like, what are they doing? Like, what does a cow do? Right? It has multiple stomachs because it's eating low quality food. And so to extract the nutrients out of it, has to chew it and chew it and chew it and chew it and chew it. And I think if we look at this idea of rumination, and I think there's a very big difference and a distinction between rumination and introspection, right? I'm not telling people, hey, don't think about stuff. I think we certainly should, but there is a point where it is no longer productive. It is no longer useful. And that's where we're ruminating on it. And this tends to circle around low quality thoughts. There's no nutrition really to be had from this concept. But our brain really likes practicing the problem. It's what it's designed to do. It's a problem solving machine. And if there isn't a problem to solve, it will create one. And it will continue to work on practicing solving that problem, because throughout our history and in evolution, however long you want to think we've been kicking around on this rock, that has served us really well. I think part of that scanning device also needs to be in the present and observing and recognizing when that brain gets caught in the loop and it's doing this thing, and it's not a flaw, it's a feature. And I think when we recognize, like, hey, I'm not broken, right? I'm not broken because I'm anxious about the future or I'm depressed about the past. My brain just got stuck doing this thing that it's designed to do. And me, as the driver of this thing, you know, my consciousness, my actual self, because my brain is not me, it is just an organ. And my mind is also not me. It's just an aspect of myself, of my body, my mind, and my spirit. And so as this collective whole, if I can recognize that, then I can just shift it and put it where it needs to be, and hopefully put it to a more useful task, or build a better model than this one that I'm currently operating from.
I'm really digging this, and we're getting into the concept of this next video I have here too, but I want to preface it with the fact that a rendering is still just a rendering, right? We can have thoughts and we can have ideas and all that stuff. And I before I get too deep into it, I'm going to put this video up here and then we'll carry on the convo. Here we go.
Have the best idea in the history of all mankind in your head. And if you don't open up your computer and put words into the word processing machine, it doesn't matter. That idea doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter. There's probably thousands and thousands of people with thousands of brilliant ideas that they don't have the discipline to make that idea come to fruition. If you don't have that kind of discipline to make that happen, your ideas are worthless.
Bam. Strong words. Thoughts? Josh, I'm coming right back to you.
Oh man, yeah, Jacko's not messing around. He likes that discipline thing, which is a whole nother topic into itself. I'll try to stay on point because I have thoughts on that as well. But I think that there is quite a bit of truth to what he's saying. You know, thoughts without actions aren't very useful. But in the same respect, everything does have to start with a thought. So I don't think it's an either or, it's a yes and. And so I think it's easy to look at a video like that and hear the strong wording and the strong opinion and maybe take from it like, well, I just need to do stuff. Just constantly do. Don't think, don't contemplate, don't self-assess, just action, bring your ideas into fruition. And I think sometimes, yes. I don't know that it's as simple as that, because sometimes there are ideas that we have that should not be brought into fruition. And it is only through a little bit more introspection and thinking that we pull back and say, actually, that's a bad idea. Let's not do that. All ideas are not created equal. And so being able to filter, like we talked about before, the good ones from the bad ones, and then taking some action to bring that into existence, I think is really important. And that's not to beat up on Jocko. He's got 90 seconds to, they pulled this a 90-second clip, right? And I'm sure he would expound and elaborate more, but I think that's part of the problem with living in the vapid social media culture that we have today, is everything has to be condensed into a 3-second soundbite or a meme. And it's so much more nuanced than that. So it's really hard. I mean, I love these clips that you're bringing up, but man, it's hard to get that information concise enough in a short amount of time to make it fully useful, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking. I'm with you too. And it's one of the reasons I like using them for the show specifically is that they create thoughts. People go, oh, but maybe, perhaps, and then you start to, it develops that discussion to it too. I love it. Shaun, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Josh on this one. I think that the video, if Jocko had the opportunity, would have been expanded and he would have added nuance. And so as he was closing out the clip, he essentially said, and I'm paraphrasing, I believe he said, thoughts are worthless. And of course, that's not true, as Josh just stated, and as I agree. However, this is the problem with social media, having to make an impact in a very small period of time across a wide body of demographic. Some will fall off the sides, both sides, because they won't vibe with it, or they'll be, what a jerk, and my thoughts are valuable, they're not worthless. So, there's going to be different people picking up what he's putting down. I went through this exact same thing yesterday. I was out on my single speed, riding around, I had my camera, I was taking some photos. I just stopped and I was about to take a photo of something, and someone was sauntering up the sidewalk, a local here in town. And they said, hey, what are you doing? I said, just give me a sec, I got to get this photo. And so they were patient. They actually sat down on the sidewalk and waited for me to finish the photo. And then I said, hey, how you doing? And we engaged in a conversation that lasted a few minutes. And I said, what are you up to? And they rattled off like a story about all the things that they're going to do next year. And I was pretty patient. For me, I was patient. Anyway, I let it go for a few minutes. And I decided within about 12 seconds that it was a story. They had this idea of what they were going to do next year, but it was, I'm not going to say it was impractical. It was just that they'd done nothing practical on the idea yet. And so when the story was finished, I said, that's a cool idea, but it's a good story. And they said, no, no, you're not, actually, unless you can tell me right now what you've done. Have you got a business plan yet? Have you got a business license yet? Have you done any construction yet? Have you engaged in any trades yet? Who have you told besides me this story? Because it's a story until you apply action. And I mean, not like hammer to nail. I'm talking as simple as picking up a pen to paper. That's when thoughts become action. Anything that's rattling around in your head takes externalization to become what I will call practically interesting. Theoretical models are cool. I love it, man. I love hearing a good story also. But I prefer to see pedal to the metal or some outcomes starting to shape up after the fun story. So I wrapped up our conversation yesterday with, hey, listen, I'm not being a Debbie Downer. I'm just saying that your story is a fun story. Hopefully, we'll get to talk about the reality of things next year. And that's where I left it. And they were cool as a cucumber. They understood the point that I was putting across. There was some initial hesitation, though, because they felt like I was challenging them. There was almost a little bit of offense initially when I said, yeah, cool story, bro. That's essentially how I delivered it. And, some people don't take to that too well. But I don't have all day to challenge someone intellectually with all of your thoughts aren't actions. And so it's interesting that all around us, every day, I think we all have this opportunity to challenge the person in front of us with, great thoughts. What have you done about them? Now, there's a way to do it with everyone. There's a way to interact in that moment with everyone. Sometimes it takes this, sometimes it takes that, depending on the person. But I think that we have a responsibility to not put people in check. Maybe challenge is the wrong word, but a questioning line of what's next.
Man, I love this. I've been kicking around this rendering thing in my head as we've been talking, and it's been bouncing off the sides and stuff like that. And it reminded me of the influx of 3D printing nowadays, right? And the fact that you can render something in 3D and then you can print it out, and voila, awesome. But I think, and I've known some people that have gotten into it, and they're like, "Oh man, it's so much more work than it actually you think it is." It's just, you got to do all the CAD program, you got to be able to set this up, you got to have the right stuff, you got to have all the gear, all the things, and then it takes hours upon hours upon hours to actually print out. And I was likening it to this concept of ideas that most people have of, how they want to live their life. I'm going to be this. And I'm sure, Josh, you've heard this before from people who want to be fighters,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, I'm going to make it to the UFC. And you're like, probably not.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, so you have what you're talking about is the schematics, right? Like you have the schematic, but until you push play on that button, that material is not going to get extruded and put into place. And so I think that there really is, some merit to this idea, especially within our circle. And you may not be able to do this to random strangers on the street and kind of, give them that line of questioning. But even so, just coming out of curiosity, I think just being curious and asking the line of questioning of where are you going with this can be really helpful for other people to get that idea out of their head and out of just being, verbalizing it and into action. And I honestly, I look at these just as degrees of the process, and none of them are better or worse than the other. They're all necessary, right? It starts with the thought and the schematic that you draw in your mind's eye. And then I think the next step is you verbalize it, you speak it into existence. So you think it into existence, then you speak it into existence. And then this is where most people kind of get tripped up, is actually taking action to bring it into existence. But you kind of have to have all three, right? I don't know that you can bring just generate a thing, right? I guess it's possible, but the likelihood of it being anything worthwhile is probably going to be low. If I just start picking up pieces of wood and hammering them together haphazardly, right? Like, I mean, I'm making something, but I don't know that it's going to be very useful or valuable, right? If I haven't gone through that process of planning it out, and then, somewhere in between, maybe I talk to my wife and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about building a chicken coop. And what do you think? Right. And as that process, it refines it a little bit further, and it solidifies the concept. And once I've gone there, then I can actually go and start putting pieces together and constructing something. And I think, our life can follow a very similar pathway where we create this idea and then we verbalize it and then we start taking the steps. But we probably need to recognize that all three are equally important and kind of need to follow that sequence, I think.
Yeah, I'm digging this. Yesterday we talked about transitional characters and going through transition in and of yourself, but also people who come into your lives and will help you transition out of something. And I like where you're going with this. And Shaun, perhaps you're that transitional character for the gentleman that you talked to on the side of the street, right? Is that he came up with the idea, he verbalized it to you, you challenged him with, what have you done? And then that might drive him into a position where he actually puts the work in and does the thing. I agree, though. I think a lot of people get stuck on that position of the work because it's almost relieving to talk about the idea to people of like, oh, I have this great idea, and then you get it out and you're like, oh, and then people respond with, oh, that's a great idea, you should totally do that. Yeah, I should totally do that, but never actually go anywhere with it. So I think that's where most people get trapped up, is in that little circle of positive reinforcement that a lot of people give, of just like, that's a great idea, versus what Shaun did, which is, now what?
So I think what happens with that is actually it's a sleight of hand that happens with our brain, where you actually, more often than not, you don't want to do the thing, you just want the experience of having the thing, right? Most guys don't want to be professional fighters. What most guys, and they don't enjoy actually fighting. What they enjoy is being recognized as a fighter, and they enjoy getting their hand raised and getting, belts and awards and that sort of thing. But the process, not so much. And if they can kind of skip that process and just get what our brain makes as a close enough approximation, like you get the reward, you're like, oh, that's great, man, that's amazing, I think you'd be an awesome fighter. Well, you just gave me the thing that I was looking for in the first place. And so that's where it stops. I don't need to put any more work, because I already got what I was looking for. I got the recognition. And so when we are trying to craft our life, and we're trying to carve this this reality that we want to have, I think instead of projecting and thinking about the finished product, I think where we really want to wrap our minds around is like, what is that process that it's going to take there? And do I actually want that? Can I actually be in love with this process, not the outcome? And if I can do that, if I can find ways to appreciate and enjoy and really embrace everything in between, oddly enough, the outcome kind of becomes inevitable, right? And so it's I don't know if that makes it kind of a cart horse process here, but I think that is one of the best ways we can craft it. And I think that is the model or the concept of discipline that maybe Jocko is referring to here, is not I have to force myself to do this or else, but rather, hey, I'm going to consistently do this process because that's actually the part that I'm chasing. And then whatever the outcome is just a byproduct. It's a happy accident. If I become a UFC champion, great. But really, I just like training and developing these skills and testing those skills to see where I am. I'm chasing the curiosity. I'm curious, how much can I develop myself in this capacity? How good can I be at this? And in that endeavor, there is no failure. There is only data. I'm just gathering data. Okay, every fight I can demonstrably see this is where I'm at. Great, now I know that. And I'm going to see if I can get better in the next one. And I do that for as long as that holds my curiosity. And if I do it long enough, the outcome will probably be favorable.
Yeah, I was actually literally just talking to a white belt about this on the jiu-jitsu mats. We were doing a class, and he was just like, I just really want to win, but I know I'm not going to win against you. And I'm like, that's not the point, man. Like, I'm here because I enjoy jiu-jitsu. So if somebody gets a tap, that means I have to stop doing jiu-jitsu, and that's not what I want to do. I want to keep rolling. So like, let's just keep playing. We're not looking for submissions. And it kind of changed his mindset in the moment. But that's a great point. Shaun, you got what do you got, Josh?
Well, I was just going to say, sorry. This comes back to the model concept, right? His model for success was to submit you, right? That's a win. But if I reframe what winning actually is that I get to participate in this thing that I enjoy, and I hopefully get to, and I get to experience it in a way that gives me more knowledge and satisfies this curiosity, then winning is simply being on the mat and sharing that role. And that's coming back to our perception creates our reality. Now, I just won by not actually doing anything different. I didn't get better at jiu-jitsu. I didn't beat you. I didn't defeat you. I went from probably losing to now almost certainly winning simply by reframing my perception of what a win is, and it changes my reality.
Yeah, I love that. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, these are, as Josh was speaking, it sounded almost like repetitive of what we've stated on several podcasts. So, and that's like one of the greatest things, the greatest compliments I can say, because you've captured in a shorter form something that I've been trying to say over multiple podcasts. I believe that curiosity and engagement will create outcomes as life unfolds, period. And so, not getting too wrapped around the axle or not getting too hyper focused on getting that first tap is difficult because it's an unexperienced thing. It's maybe you want to get that first tap, maybe you need to get that first tap. Whatever the case is for each individual, there is a point in time when someone has to experience their first tap if they're in the game long enough. And so all of these tiny little moments are opportunities to learn, of course, and see if we are truly invested in the trajectory that we've chosen. And so now what? Going back to what Josh stated, that, there's maybe three things that have to occur for something to unfold. You've got to think it, you've got to say it, etc. Well, that is true on certain timelines, and usually it's on long timelines. But you have to have context in life, in all things, I believe. And so you've got your long timeline that has a predictable, possible unfolding. But then you have the in the now time. We'll call it the present time or the flow time or whatever you want to think of it as, where you're not thinking that much, but you are creating a lot of stuff. Going back to Tier 1 Special Operations, there's a lot of things that you don't have to think about. They just unfold. But that's through a ton of repetitions. That's through a ton of experience. And so timelines are contextual against who you are and how many games you've played in your life, how many constructs you've developed, how many constructs you've put next to each other to see what the constructs can learn from each other within your own freaking mind. And so all things are contextual to the person who's thinking them and living them. The more you can think long timeline versus present timeline and view the two against each other is perhaps a new way for you to enrich your thought process within your constructs.
Man, I'm loving where this is going, and I got one more video here as well. But any other thoughts on that, Josh? You got anything to add?
I love that, and it's such a great point to bring up. Where, yeah, we can very easily get caught up projecting ahead, right? But and thinking what my life could be like. But we do have these moments that we're experiencing in real time, and through our I like your concept of the constructs, right? Through our previous constructs, we are able to be in that moment, in that flow state. And you can see this it's the difference between a black belt and a white belt, right? Where the white belt has to consciously be thinking about every single thing that they're doing. It is next to impossible for someone to come in day one jiu-jitsu and be able to get themselves into a flow state. But as they are more comfortable with the construct, that becomes more and more prevalent, and you can get to a state where you're almost consistently in that. And obviously you see that with tier 1 guys doing high speed stuff. Anything that has really, I guess, severe consequences has the tendency to put us in that state and forces us to kind of create in real time. And I think the only way to do that successfully is through past experience and the repetition that you've talked about, and a level of comfort with that medium. And sometimes, man, we get lucky. Sometimes people, you put someone in a situation they've never been in, and somehow they manage to make it through. But when you're doing that consistently, there's no substitute for experience. And I think that it is through that experience that we gain perspective, and it is that perspective that allows us to shift our perception to either perceive the here and now almost subconsciously in that flow state, or to perceive a future outcome further on a projected timeline. And the more experience we've been able to accumulate, the better we are at collapsing and expanding that timeline consistently.
This is you clicked something in my head here when you talked about the the one random person who might be able to do the thing, whatever it is, right? And I think we get fixated on the outliers a lot, and I think this is the challenge. I use this analogy pretty often too, is that when you're driving down the road, you don't see 95% of the traffic because it's all moving with you. It's the outliers that are the ones that are challenging to deal with, right? The guys who are speeding, the guys who are going too slow, the guys who are just whipping in and out of lane changes or not paying attention, et cetera, right? Those are the outliers. And I think that a lot of times, just because we see those so often, because they're so different, it almost negates the 99% of the rest of the population that's just rolling the same pace. We're all kind of like, yep, thinking the same. And I mean, we see this on social media all the time, right? It's the extreme views get a lot of play. The moderate views get less play. I mean, we see it with the collective as well. I put out clips that are meant to be informational and, thought-provoking and stuff like that. And they get less response than some of the funny stuff I put out, or I did a video of Shaun beating up a bear at one point in time, and it was hilarious. It got a lot of views. And we put out one that was really poignant, a great take from the show, and it didn't get as much traffic. So I think that kind of along the lines of those outliers almost take up so much of our processing time. Just like, these people.
What sells more, right, per volume? Bottles of Pappy Van Winkle or Diet Coke, right? Like people tend to prefer the more sugary, easy to consume, quick fix type things, and I think we're wired for that, right? We're not, the things that take time to really appreciate and process require bandwidth, and they require depth, and they just require. And as a human organism, like there's a survival element of like quick and easy, quick and easy, quick and easy, quick and easy. And again, we can look at that as a flaw and say that, well, we're just built poorly, right? To seek comfort in all of these things. And that's the trap. And, that's why we're in this state. And it's like, no. It's really important that the human species, there was a driver to say, hey, it's way too cold out here. Let me figure out some kind of way of rubbing these sticks together to see if I can make it hotter, or protect and shield myself from the environment, or cover myself in this dead animal skin, whatever. Like if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have survived. And so recognizing that that's there, understanding that, but then also knowing that like there is more out there, and that there is more depth, and that it's there for the taking if we so choose, right? And so I think that comes back to the idea of choice, of like, yeah, you can choose to, eat cotton candy, or you can have a nice juicy ribeye. One is going to cost you a little bit more for sure, but it's also going to have exponentially more benefit. And it's up to us to decide that cost benefit analysis. And sadly, most people, I think, don't have maybe the introspection or the self-awareness to make an accurate assessment of that potential ROI.
I like that. Thinking about yourself as an ROI. That's a great way to do it. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think about ROI all the time. And I think one of the reasons that not enough people think about it as much as maybe Josh does, or I do, or others do, is because they're in the car next to all the other cars going the same speed and not thinking about it. They're in traffic called cotton candy, not in ribeye. And so, in traffic, every time you come to an intersection, you get to look left and right or speed straight ahead. These are all choices in life. And if you're paying attention to the traffic pattern, you'll see that there are outliers in the traffic pattern. And why are those outliers outliers? Is it because they're driving fast? Is it because they're driving slow? Is it because they're breaking the rules? Is it because they've got the biggest truck, the smallest truck? All of these things gain our attention, but they don't gain our interest. I'm going to say that again. All of these things gain our attention, but they don't gain our interest. You have to be interested in what you see, not just see. And so when that car whips past you at warp factor 3 because you're doing the speed limit, if you just think, oh, wow, that guy's a jerk. Oh, wow, that guy's going to get a speeding ticket. Oh, wow. I like to consider things a little bit deeper than that. Otherwise, you're going to live on cotton candy for the rest of your life. When you see outliers within the pattern, they are worth taking a moment to consider the why of the moment, not just the means or the cause and effect or the causality of the moment. Because someone's going super duper fast, it messes with the pattern. That's an outcome. But I like to know the why before I see the outcome. And so I'm looking at traffic from a satellite view and trying to form patterns rather than driving my car and fixated on my steering wheel, wondering why someone just whipped by me and then I'm changing the radio station the next second. Deep thought about the world around us is what really moves the needle as far as I'm concerned. That's
such a beautiful analogy that I think it can be easy to overlook the profundity of it. So I kind of want to just like maybe just reiterate and hammer it because it's so good that I think people might easily mistake that as just talking about traffic. and really you're talking about life here, and you're talking about being able to step back and pull yourself out of the tunnel vision that is just being perceived through these two eyeballs that are just facing the front and only have this much field of vision. And I remove myself and kind of step outside of my present situation to observe the pattern, see myself relative to that pattern, and then have the curiosity to try and understand all of the composite elements that are creating that pattern, and to just observe and be aware and take stock of that. And I think if we can do that time to time, we can't do that all the time in our life. Like you're in the middle of a fist fight, that's maybe not the time to have an out-of-body experience. You may find yourself in one, involuntarily. Maybe that's not the time to choose to eject, right? You need to be present. But there are moments where, and I think a lot of times we can find ourselves in these, emotional states. Oftentimes for me, when I have to pull back is when I'm in somewhat of a funk, right? Instead of just being in my car and looking at traffic and seething with anger or afraid for my life or being lost, not knowing where the exit is. When I'm in these, call them troughs of the wave, that to me is a great time to pull back and look at the big picture and gain some perspective, right? And it is only through that perspective, looking at a problem from different angles, that again, we can perceive it more accurately, right? If I only look at something from a head-on view, that model is incomplete. Talking about the 3D rendering, well, that becomes a 2D model. And so there's so much information that I'm losing. But if I can step outside and remove myself from that two-dimensional flat view, I can perceive it more, in depth, literally. But now I understand it better, which is going to give me more opportunities to work through that and potentially solve that problem. And I think the only way we gain that perspective is through experience. So it goes experience lends us perspective. Perspective allows us to better perceive the world around us.
Yeah, I could not agree with you guys more. I was going to use the word that awareness.
Mhm.
That's what it requires, is that at the root of this, you have to be able to look around in your car. There's been so many times I've been on a drive and I just arrive at my destination and I was just like,
Oh,
what just happened?
yeah.
Right. I thought I was not aware. I was on autopilot. I was somewhere else. I wasn't really paying attention to the drive. And I think, to Sean's point, right, you can come up to the intersection and you can look around. You can look at the other drivers. You can look around. You can wonder things. You can be curious. But it starts with the desire to be aware, to know what's going on around you. And there are, I think, a lot of people out there that they're either in future or they're in past. They're rarely in the present. They're rarely looking at where they are right now. They're mostly thinking I got to get my kids to school, and I got to get to the, and then I got to do these things, and then I'm up, blah, 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 and never really getting to there, sitting in the car doing whatever it is they're doing. Shaun, what are you thinking?
I think very simply looking at not, this is a broad generalization. I'm not saying everyone lives their life like this. I'm not trying to be a jerk, not being mean-spirited when I say this. It's just an observation. I think there's a lot of people in the world that are living a two-dimensional life in a three-dimensional space, unaware of the importance of the fourth dimension, which is time. And so 2D in a 3D world, unaware of 4D. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, write that down. 2D living in a 3D, unaware of a 4D. Do a little bit of research today and see why that's important. If you're living that life, see why it's important to get out of it. Get out into a bigger world that actually, taking us back to the start of the show, exists in our mind. All of this is our own making. It's all our own choosing. All of this goes away or performs in front of us based on what we want. And what do we want? You've got to think about what you want. You've got to know what it's all about. You've got to understand the game that you're playing and why you're playing it. And so we might be talking about traffic, but we're talking about something a lot bigger than that. Maybe a fifth dimension, who knows?
Well, and one thing, Chance, that you were talking about, this awareness, I think that actually comes from and only really can be derived from intention. It is the intentionality, right? And I think that's what most people tend to be lacking, and I am people as well, where there are times where it's like, man, I wasn't being very intentional with my time or my effort or my energy or whatever. But if we have intention, and this is the part I think that really determines, our life path, is figuring out, okay, what are my intentions? What is the intention for living my life? What does that look like? And that comes back to this thought. But if I can hold that intention and I can apply it to everything that I do, then it will give me the awareness, because I am intentional about everything I do. I have a curiosity as to how those actions will reflect or interact with this concept of my intention, right? And so from those two places, I can maintain kind of a constant awareness, and I can determine whether I need to be laser focused in this moment and draw my awareness, to a pinpoint precision, which some situations require, or I can broaden that scope. And, I compare it to being like a laser versus a candle. What's more useful? It depends on what you're trying to do, right? Mount a candle to your rifle and let me know how that works out for you, right? Try to use a laser pointer to illuminate a room to find your wallet. Also, good luck. They each have their own practical purpose. And so what I need to decide is, which one do I need to be right now in this moment? Which tool is more useful? Which model is more effective? Because again, they will inevitably break down in when applied in the wrong space.
That's such a great point, and I love the way you put that. I'm just picturing myself trying to look for my wallet with a laser pointer. I'm like, oh god, that'd be a challenge. But we are just about at an hour now, and I just want to say thank you, Josh. It's been a fantastic conversation, Shaun. Really appreciate it. We've gone into realms I did not expect, and I love it. So it's just been awesome. I do want to get some final thoughts, though, on anything that we've been talking about and anything that's still bubbling on the back of your brain. Josh, you got anything still up there?
No, man, I think I got most of it out. I appreciate you guys indulging in letting me go on this little journey. These are some of the things that quite frequently rattle around inside my brain, and I don't always get the opportunity to espouse them, and especially with such, such intellectual gentlemen like yourself who have some really brilliant thoughts. I was very, very exciting to hear what you guys had to say and really just kind of lean in and listen to your contributions to this. It was a lot of fun, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure, man. We love having good conversations. Shaun, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Josh just said because I really enjoyed this conversation. I do love bouncing ideas off of fifth dimension thinkers, and I've just coined that phrase. It's mine now. In fact, I might have to patent it or trademark it. Fifth dimension, perhaps it's intention. If 2 dimension, 3 dimension, 4th dimension is time, perhaps the 5th dimension is intention. Who knows? Maybe they'll discover that in 100 years. But thanks for the combo. It'll have me thinking throughout the rest of the day, and hopefully it'll have some other people thinking about their lives, their choices, what it's all about. And those are all good things to think about.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough. I think we'll have to make a t-shirt of it. Fifth dimension thinking, intention. I like it. That'll be the way to do it. But yeah, I got nothing to add. This has just been an outstanding conversation, and I am definitely going to be thinking about it for a while. I'm actually headed out hunting tomorrow, and I'm pretty stoked. So that's my whole intention right now. I am locked in. It's going to be a good day. Again, can't thank you enough. This has been awesome. And as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week. Chimo.